Now being 3 o'clock, we can commence with the October 20th, 2021 meeting of the Laconia Police Commission. Call us to order. Would you please rise for the salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call for the attendees. Commissioner Mello? Here. Commissioner Davis? Here. And Commissioner Horton is here. So we have a quorum. I'd like to recognize the staff president, Chief Matthew J. Canfield, and Administrative Assistant Laurie Marsh. We have a quorum, and then we will proceed with the agenda. Personnel matters, commendations and awards. Chief Canfield.
We'll be having our annual award ceremony on November 10th to honor and recognize the hard work of all of our officers. This was normally done in May during Police Week, but with COVID, they split up Police Week, and we're holding it in November instead. So that'll be November 10th.
Resignations and retirement.
Nothing.
Promotions and classification changes.
Nothing.
Command staff reports. Support Division, Chief Canfield.
So last week, myself and Captain Grayton did the capital improvement presentation, presented the outlay of capital items. Working with Captain Grayton to finalize our budget for next year. That was typically due in beginning of December, so before we submit that, I'll certainly brief you on what that's going to look like. Today we did a drug operation over at 20 Crescent Street. That was a combined effort between our drug unit, all of our detectives, and patrol. In combination with that, we used SWAT patrol officers, and the SWAT team executed a search warrant on that location and arrested 2 individuals, charged them with a multitude of things, and recovered a fair amount of drug paraphernalia, packaging items, and fentanyl. So this has been a nuisance house where they've been dealing drugs actively out of for a period of time. This location was the subject of an investigation last year. We did a search warrant on it approximately a year ago, so they're back at it, and we got another search warrant. So just some good work on everybody. I think they were in. I think I was in at 3:30 this morning. So certainly everyone was in early this morning, and it was a good operation. Detectives have been extremely busy. They've been inundated with sexual assault cases lately. They took in 4 new cases last week, so these are certainly in-depth investigations that take a lot of time and a lot of interviews, a lot of CAC interviews, so they've been busy with that. We were awarded a Department of Justice de-escalation grant that we had applied for in the amount of $200,000. This provided training equipment for interactive use of force training, as well as the ability to send 2 people to instructor school to teach the entire department about de-escalation. We've already done de-escalation training, but this is an ongoing annual requirement that came out of the LEAC Commission from the governor's office. So that was certainly good news. I think we were only one of 3 recipients in the state to get that grant, and certainly the highest amount on that grant. So that was really some really good work. We've also applied for a school violence grant in the amount of $380,000. That's a joint grant with the school department. Some of it is to provide for equipment and training with their staff and training with their officers to respond to an active shooter, God forbid, should one occur. So we're waiting to hear from that. We have not gotten approval for it as of yet. We did get approval on a justice assistance grant for equipment in the amount of $12,000, so that just came through. The new cars that were ordered in March, we have a tentative delivery date of mid-November. So hopefully that holds true with everything that's going on with ordering nowadays. And that is it for support.
Orders and bulletins.
I don't have anything specific about that. You have the orders that were issued out through the month, so
Yep.
unless there's any questions.
Operations Division, Chief Canfield.
Operations has been busy as usual. I'll go over the stats in a little bit, but they've been especially busy with the fall. They've policed the Weirs Toberfest, the Biketemberfest up in the Weirs. The Wicked Weirs event that will be held this weekend. There'll be a block party up at the Tower Hill Tavern. And then they've been busy helping with some other bigger events, particularly at the Colonial when they have those events with helping with traffic and foot patrols in that area. So they've been staying busy.
Questions? Okay, moving on. Hirings.
We have a recruitment test on November 7th. That will be held at the Laconia Middle School. They'll be doing the PT test, the written test, and the oral boards the following week. We hope to fill our 2 open vacancies out of that test with the hope that we can get backgrounds done in time to send them to the January Academy, which will make us full staffed. We're also working with a company called iHearst Media. So they'll be helping us work with a media campaign through social media to promote interest in recruitment throughout the greater New England area. So we're looking to work with them for another recruitment test in January should we have any additional openings or vacancies. So we will kind of looking to push that along with the recruitment bonus that Councilor Cheney helped us get. So looking to make that a pretty robust program.
Moving on to Commission action, the acceptance of the minutes of the previous meeting.
Make a motion, we accept the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. I assume that the, under 5A, it mentions the October 20th meeting, which has been postponed until November 10th.
Correct.
So that'll be picked up in today's minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
On a motion made by Commissioner Mello, second by Commissioner Davis, passes unanimously. The meeting minutes of the September 23rd were accepted as distributed. Out-of-state schools.
I do have one request for Detective Tony Horan to attend the SWAT Team Leader Development School in Brockton, Mass. Total cost being $1,728. Detective Horan is currently Assistant Team Leader on the SWAT team. We've taken a leadership role, being that this is a regional team, one of the biggest community in Belknap County. His leadership has certainly been very well needed on that team. So this is ongoing education, which has proven to be a good school in the past. So there is a request to send him to this school in Brockton, Mass, November 15th to the 19th.
Discussion? Entertain a motion?
Make a motion, we send Detective Horan to the school for SWAT team.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Mello, second by Commissioner Davis. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Review of monthly activity reports.
For the month of September, we responded to a total of 2,035 calls for service. We're currently at 21,360 calls for service year to date. Last year's total year to date, or actually year to date, was 19,000. So our total calls for service are up about 12.5%. Criminal offenses investigated. We investigated 275 crimes during the month of September. Made a total of 98 physical custody arrests, which is up 8.86% from last year. So far, we've made 958 arrests for the year. conducted 686 motor vehicle stops, which brings us to a total of 7,919 motor vehicle stops for the year, which is up 55.76%. Issued 38 summonses, 584 warnings. We had no fatal accidents for the month. We responded to a total of 36 motor vehicle accidents, 9 of which had injury. Issued 62 parking tickets, arrested 7 DWIs, took 23 people into custody for intoxication. We responded to a total of 26 domestic disturbance calls, total of 94 other disturbance calls, 5 suicidal subjects, and investigated 11 violation of restraining orders. And our volunteer unit volunteered 5 hours during the month of September.
Questions or comments? Moving on to Criminal Investigative Unit. Monthly report.
For the month of September, detectives were assigned 18 initial cases, conducted 19 follow-up investigations on other in-progress cases that remained with patrol, made 1 felony arrest, initiated 4 felony charges, 2 misdemeanor arrests, 6 misdemeanor charges, conducted a total of 24 search warrants, cleared 2 cases exceptionally, 2 cases unfounded. They conducted a total of 18 sex offender registrations, 2 computer-related crimes, 4 drug intel sheets, and 46 body-worn camera redactions.
Questions, comments? Moving on to budget printouts.
Budget is in good shape. We're still early in the year, but we've been monitoring it closely, and we're in good shape unless there's any questions.
None. Moving on to monthly traffic statistics. Chief Canfield.
So for the, I went over the traffic statistics previously. Number 1 cause of the accidents was conditions categorized as other, which attributed to 7 of those motor vehicle accidents. Number 1 location was Union Avenue, which attributed for 14 of the accidents. And that's it for the motor vehicle.
Questions, comments? Hearing none. Moving on to monthly fleet report. Chief Canfield.
I have nothing under the monthly fleet report.
Now, at the last meeting, the new vehicles are coming in December. Now it's November. They moved it up a little bit, or?
Yeah, so they say mid-November, so hopefully that holds true.
Good. All right, on to correspondence to and from the department.
There was one survey that was in online that was done. I'm sure you've read it. It was pretty negative, but I think that considering the source of it, I don't think it's a legit complaint, so.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah.
Wow. Chief's report, Chief Canfield.
So year-to-date, we've responded to a total of 54 drug overdose calls. And on your sheet, it's going to show that we've had 4 drug overdose deaths. Currently, we're investigating, that's slightly off from the true numbers, which is at 8 overdose deaths so far this year. The reason for the difference is that these are pulled on when they're categorized as actual drug overdose deaths. The 8 are suspected, we just haven't gotten the lab results back. So they are currently investigating 8 for the year, which is considerably more than last year. I think we had a total of 4 deaths for the year last year, so we're trending at twice that amount right now. Halloween will be held October 31st on Sunday from 5 to 8 p.m., so we'll be out and about policing that. As you know, we have our open house event tomorrow from 11 to 2 at the police station. So I'm sorry, Saturday. Saturday. That should be a fun event. There'll be some demonstrations, some giveaways for the kids, some hot dogs and food. We're combining it with National Drug Take Back Day, so people can bring their unused medications, get rid of those, and do tours of the police station. So certainly welcome everybody to come down and attend that event.
You gonna have the drone too?
We are.
Good.
Yep. We've begun work on a retiree Christmas newsletter that we started last year, so we got to work on that a little bit earlier just to keep our retirees informed of new faces, new changes, things that have happened over the year. It was pretty well received last year, and I think people like to stay in touch with what's going on in the department after they've retired. So that's something we continue with. We've experienced an issue with our, or we've been experiencing an issue with our heating and ventilation system in the police department. The last several months, it's been very fickle. So it's been either really hot or really cold. It's created a condensation problem, which has resulted in mold forming around all the vents. So we took one of the vents off, and they're pretty well infested with dust, and I'm not sure what the extent of the mold is. We did purchase our own mold kit. We did our own samples, which came back and identified it as mold. So we've been in touch with Amy from Parks and Rec, and she's been working with a company that they hired to do official tests of it, and we're waiting for those results, but certainly expect it to be deemed as mold. So Amy's working on that to rectify that. I think it's going to involve cleaning all the duct work, but certainly our heating and ventilation system is in need of some serious help. We ran all summer on one condenser for the air conditioning unit, which I think kind of threw the balance of it off. And I know she was working on looking at what it would cost to replace the system. So not really sure where that's going, but I wanted you in the loop on that. Lastly, next Thursday, we'll be participating with the Taylor community. They're doing appreciation, and they're just asking for us to drive through so they can hold up signs that for appreciation of law enforcement and everything that law enforcement and fire do. So we'll be participating in that. And that's all I have for my report.
Questions? Okay, moving on to old business. Chief, old business.
Nothing?
New business.
Nothing?
Other business.
Nothing?
Citizen comments.
You might be talking about me.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll walk my knee. All right.
I got a bum knee, so I can appreciate. Well, thank you for letting me talk with you for a minute. I wanted to tell you that I've asked both the police and fire chiefs to provide me with data on pay, and particularly on pay parity between Laconia and surrounding and other cities. I'm intending to work on making sure we are competitive, and even if we're competitive at the low end, are we competitive at the upper end? Because frankly, we can less afford to lose a senior person than we can somebody who's just started. So I've asked the chief to provide me with that, and I hope that's okay with the commission. I also asked him for crime stats in a little more detail than the monthly report. The idea being that I want to use that information for some proposals I intend to make with regards to manning and or staffing of the department. I want to sit with the chief and do a manpower review, and based on that, get some idea of whether we are where Laconia should be, or should we be looking for additional manpower. This may come as a shock to you, but back in the 80s, I was a police chief here, and so I have some knowledge of what this city needs for policing. I have some knowledge of what the city needed for policing, which is why I want to talk with the chief in more detail. I think the point I would make to you is, I can see, a novice can look at the stats and say, the PD's doing a lot more stuff, criminal stuff, motor vehicle stuff, calls for service, than we did back when I was here, and yet, the department is essentially, with a few exceptions, at the same manning level. I know what the argument is. The argument is, well, the population hasn't changed. But I would love to go back and check. I don't think we had an overdose in 1989 and 1990, probably back 10 years. We might have had one or two. We certainly had no deaths from drugs. If we did a drug raid, it was because the state had done all the work. We provided manpower to help them do that, but my point being, the department's doing a lot more of that stuff than it did when I was here. And I think a review of manning levels, personnel levels, is appropriate at this time. And hopefully I can, I shouldn't assume. If perhaps where we're at right now is sufficient, that's fine. But if we can identify some needs, I think that would be helpful. I have had other councilmen speak to me about observing the cars more. The heightened stops for motor vehicle issues has heightened the awareness of the department. And I'm glad to see that. I think we can do more. But I'm thankful for the chief for making that happen. The last item on my list for today is, I asked, and I'm sure he may have, I presume he told you, I asked him to add an item to his capital improvements. Did you have a chance to share that with me?
I did not.
Okay. And when I say at the last minute, I mean the night before at 8 o'clock, I called him and said, get some information about parking enforcement. Both the city council and the planning board and even the planning master plan committee, steering committee, have all discussed parking as an issue for downtown. You're probably aware of the 18 spots for the Colonial Theater apartments, and there's some debate about where those should be. But in that was a lot of discussion about we don't enforce 2-hour parking enough. We don't enforce it enough. I'm not sure we had to. But it's looking like that's getting to be a problem. So I asked the chief to please provide the Capital Improvement Committee with some costs, which I'm sure he can share with you, to buy equipment like you see on some of those TV programs. You know, to my horror, I found out you can't chalk tires anymore. I think that's one of those things that comes with age. You find out things, we all stand here and salute the flag. Most of us are old enough to remember when "Under God" was not in the Pledge of Allegiance. And every time I do it, I think about that. Well, every day or two since I talked to him, I see somebody parked somewhere and I think, and they can't even chalk their car. So, I'm bloviating here and I apologize for that. I've asked him to do that for me, and I intend to push to get, it's not a low dollar item or items, and that will be included in the personnel manning issue. I'm not sure we need police officers to do that. That's a discussion you and the chief should have, and let me know your feelings. We might well be able to do it with a parking enforcement person, but in either case, we'll look at that as part of the manning level issues. So I tell you all this to say, if you three gentlemen have some specific ideas or requests, I'd appreciate hearing from you either now or at some time in the near future, to add to whatever the chief is able to provide.
to that question?
Of course.
Chalking of the tires, is that a civil liberties kind of
Chief?
thing?
It was actually a lawsuit that was filed in, I want to say Wisconsin, as far as unreasonable search and seizure. That you actually seize the tire by touching it and placing chalk on it, so you can't chalk tires anymore. Yeah.
Sorry.
So the software that Counselor's talking about is, basically it's a handheld Palm Pilot. It takes a picture of the vehicle with the license plate, where it's parked, the valve stem location, and it records it automatically. It goes into the cloud. So anybody else could take that same device and it would tell you when that vehicle expires time-wise. And then you can print a digital ticket from it. Instead of handwriting the ticket, it just prints a ticket out and you place it on the windshield, so. It's pretty neat technology. I think Concord's using something similar to it. Concord has a parking enforcement division, and I agree, I don't think it has to be a police officer. I think a parking enforcement person could do it very well, so.
And I should hasten to add, as I said, I gave the chief about 12 hours' notice, and it was only a couple of days ago. So please don't be upset if he hasn't gotten it to you yet, but that's probably my fault, not his. But I look forward to pushing for that as well. And you had a second question?
Second thing is there any way that someone at the department could extrapolate these figures and get them into maybe like a once-a-month report in the paper? And these are, I mean, the average citizen doesn't know that you responded to over 2,000 calls for service. But these
Yeah.
figures are amazing. And it's,
If we had 1,000 back in the 80s, if we had 1,000 a month, it's a busy month. Motorcycle Week would bump us up to 1,800. Yeah.
but, you know, 275 criminal offenses investigated. I mean, just the figures are, the public doesn't.
Yeah,
know
I mean,
these.
those numbers are staggering. I mean, they would compare to Salem, to Portsmouth, to, you know, some of those bigger cities that are much larger than us population-wise, and those stats are much higher than theirs, generally speaking.
If I might interrupt, I think part, and this was true when I was here, I think part of the problem is, unlike those other places, Laconia is the center of this county. And with the exception of gas and chewing gum, if you want to buy something, you almost have to come to Laconia. There's a tractor supply in Guilford, and there's some stores and whatever, but certainly all the social services are here.
Yep.
And the people who use social services frequently become people we have to deal with here. So, that, I think, differentiates us from Portsmouth and Salem and Gary and places like that, Dover. And that's the argument that I want to try to get into.
But all the more reason to get these figures out. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
Yeah, we can certainly do
why?
something and get those out, for sure. Yeah, whether it's through Twitter or Facebook or, the newspaper. I'll work on that.
I think the caveat, though, is most of the surrounding towns do that, might reflect poorly on Laconia. So I would think you could make it so that, we have calls for service, but that's being visible to preventative as much as it is response to something. I think that's an important distinction, so people aren't saying, well, you got 2,000 calls for service and there's 2,000 crimes happening. It may not be that at all, maybe other things. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So it
Right.
might be,
I think it'd be advisable to check with the other towns to see what their call for service levels are. But I would also say this to you. When I was here, and George Landry was the fire chief, he and I sat in front of the city council presenting our budgets, and he listed his calls for service and picking numbers out my butt. I said for the year we had, 10,000 calls for service. He said the fire department had 18,000 calls for service. And when the meeting was over, I said, where the hell did you go to 18,000? Well, he said, there's a pumper, an engine, there's a ladder truck, and an ambulance.
Okay.
Each one, they called a call for service, as opposed to the PD that might send 5 cars. It's one call for service. And that could also be true in surrounding towns. So I agree with you, caution is advisable. And certainly before he goes public, he ought to review that all with you. But also keep in mind that, as my father said repeatedly, figures don't lie, but liars figure. And, I had a very prominent old friend who was a police chief in Belmont decades ago, who said to me recently, geez, I've been following the paper, and it looks like Belmont has more calls for service than Laconia does. And I said, well, that's nonsense, and you know it, and I know it, and it's how you count them.
Yeah, and it's also per capita too, so.
Oh, yeah.
you-
Oh, yeah.
make
Yep.
sure that,
Yep.
you know, so you have apples to apples, but.
Please forgive my casual appearance, but I had horses to take care of today.
Little ones, though, right?
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Listen, I'm down from 12, so I'm down to 3. And I'd be down to 0 if I had any courage, but I'm afraid of my wife, so. My wife has told me more than once I have to sleep sometime. And I'm not stupid, I know what that means. I don't know if I ever told you, when I retired from the PD, I went to her store. Some of you may remember she had Modern Appliance. And I went to give her my 20 years of management experience. And about 4 weeks of my management experience, she put a finger under my nose and said, I married you for better, for worse, not for lunch, go get a job. What's the matter? I said, I don't need your management experience, we'll go broke. And so, shortly after that, I went to the state, and the rest was history. All set?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a need for non-public.
We do.
Entertain a motion to go to non-public.
Confirmation of next meeting first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Next meeting is set for. Jumping ahead here. 17th, November 17th. Any conflicts? Hearing none, the 17th is good. Now, entertain a motion to go into non-public.
We'll make a motion, we go into non-public pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, numeral 2, parentheses A, for the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the disciplining of such employee, or the investigation of any charges against him or her, unless the employee affected, 1, has the right to a meeting, and 2, requests that the meeting be open, in which case requests shall be granted.
Is there a second?
Second.
On a motion made by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Mello. All in favor? Aye. Aye, passes unanimously. In accordance with RSA 91A:32A, the Laconia Police Commission entered into non-public at 3:35 PM.